Hey everyone, I'm Jessica, and I am so excited to talk about a fantastic topic today, and that is the 80s and some board games and RPGs in the solo realm that remind me of that time. Love the 80s. And these are games that sort of get across that sort of childlike sense of wonder and going on adventures in your own backyard and finding cool stuff out there. Stuff like The Goonies and E.T., The Neverending Story. There's tons of movies out there, really with children as sort of that central character and just going back and being able to go on all these cool ventures out into the world and just discovering all this cool stuff and those stories. You might ask, why can I talk about the 80s? And the reason? Yeah, that's me. Circa 1980s. I was around back then with this goofy look on my face, and I'm here with a different goofy look on my face where I laugh at everything now. What are you gonna do? And the reason that I am doing this video, partially because I love the 80s, but also because I work for Pencil First Games, and right now we have the Siblings Trouble Expanded Deluxe Edition on Kickstarter, and this one is fantastic for going on adventures as kids, and just exploring, telling stories. There's so much cool stuff in this one, and I enjoy it. It is not necessarily for solo, but I love telling stories about it to myself and just seeing those really cool things that happen. So check it out if you haven't already. So let's get into some of these games and RPGs that remind me of this fantastic time period. Up first, I will bring in here the Crusoe Crew. And this is a really interesting system where you actually have, I'll grab a couple of these, you have a map that is out there to explore where you kind of pick your destination. And it is kind of like one of those old school, not quite game books. It is a game book in a sense, but the cool thing about this is there are actually 4 different game books here, and they all are for a different character. So you'll go through and, explore, but each book is a little different because each of these kids has a unique ability. And it's really fun because these are like those, also it kind of has like a Where's Waldo, which I think was kind of 80s. I associate it with the 80s, so I'm going to go with it. But there are puzzles to work on and solve. There are hidden numbers to look at. And it's a really cool book and system that works really, really nicely. I enjoy it solo, although you can play it with multiple people, all going through the adventure together. And it's fun, it's quick. I like exploring it because I find something new every time because I'm pretty terrible at these types of puzzles, but but I get there. But that one, it's really unique, and there are also in this graphic novel line from Van Ryder Games, lots of other ones that kind of get across that same sense of exploration and adventure, but this one I think definitely feels like it's 80s style adventures, just for me at least, going on these islands and you're playing as kids, kind of just finding stuff. Really, really cool stuff. If we get into the RPG realm, I'll kind of bump back and forth here. This one is an interesting one. It is titled Top 10 Games You Can Play in Your Head by Yourself. Which may sound a little funky, but it's not. It's really cool. This is actually a newer book, but it kind of has like an old style. This looks 80s to me. Definitely gets that across. I talk about solo journaling RPGs a lot, where you will write down, you have prompts, you keep a journal, you keep it going. This one is actually like that, minus the journal and minus having to do anything. You play this in your head. And what's cool about this is you are just using your imagination and you do whatever you want. So there are all different types of modules that you can go through. It's a little bit like guided meditation in a way, so not going to be for everybody. I tried this once to start out though to see if it was for me. And there's like a quick exercise you do where you kind of like picture a house or a room that you create, you go in it, you come out, and then there's an idea where you have your shadow self goes in there and takes something away, and you need to figure out what's missing. And I said, what in the world am I doing? What is this? But it was actually pretty funny because it's me, and after figuring out that this was a complete failure, I was like, wait, it's myself. I stole the door, didn't I? And that was it. That was the solution to my little imaginary RPG. We don't know what's going on with me, but I have a lot of fun in life. So that's, that's all that matters over here. Solo games and random stuff from Jessica. Another game that is totally 80s, at least for me, is actually Fort, which might seem like a different one because you're not really coming up with adventures. But Fort is about having sort of a clubhouse with different kids that come by. And it's, you know, the gameplay is definitely not about creating stories, but the artwork is fantastic. I love having the idea of just like bringing in different kids who all have cool names. It's not like, you know, standard first names. They all sort of have nicknames that come in there. Your resources are like pizza and toys, and I still have to get it. I mean, I have it. I haven't played with it yet, but there is an expansion that includes dogs and cats. Fantastic stuff. And this one just really feels like being a kid and having fun with sort of that, the clubhouse that you would have, and just really fun things that you can do with your resources and building up your fort and doing all that. This one, I don't see it that often, but there is an unofficial solo variant out there that I really like, and that's really fun to play. Cool stuff. What else? Ah, yes. Threadbare, a Stitchpunk RPG. This is like Toy Story before there was Toy Story. And for me, in the 80s, I know this is not kids, but I played with toys all the time, stuffed animals, they went on adventures, and that's kind of like what this one is about. It's sort of, I believe the tagline is, yes, play a broken toy in a broken world. There's no humans anymore, it's toys, that's it, and they are exploring and going around the world. It has all types of cool ideas. Where are some of the, I mean, they give you ideas for different characters that you can create or play as, including socks. And yes, stealthy elephant. If you know me, I love elephants, and I just work those into my random board game posts, but just really fun, different characters that you can play as. And again, you're playing as stuffed animals, which to me feels like 80s. You know, these are not fancy toys. There's no electronics going on. Nobody's beeping or bopping or anything. It's just toys. Let's see. Another cool RPG. This one is supposed to be played in a group, but you can play any RPG solo, is Girl Underground. And this one is about sort of a coming of age story about a child who is exploring and kind of has some characters that come in along the way. I think the back of it explains it perfectly. It's inspired by Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Labyrinth, The Wizard of Oz, Spirited Away, and things in that realm, which definitely feels 80s to me. And that just having that idea of having a child sort of experiencing all this cool stuff, and coming up with a story, and you know, she's got her friends along, but just having that sense of cool stuff that you're finding along the way with these companions is a really nice adventure. To go a little bit off to the side here, in terms of something that's 80s, but maybe not 80s children, let's go with Hunted. I think you pronounce it what? Kobayashi Tower. Yeah, what is this? This is Die Hard, which is definitely 80s. It is an argument whether or not it's a Christmas movie, but it is most assuredly an 80s movie. And that is exactly what this is. There is a tower. It plays out exactly as you would expect Die Hard to play out. It's very interesting, I will say, and totally 80s because, yeah, it's Die Hard. And, you know, you get the artwork that kind of reminds you of that a little bit without it being exactly like Die Hard. But this one is exactly Die Hard in many ways. Go 80s. Another one that reminds me of the 80s is Ryuutama. And this one is a really nice RPG. This one is very much devoid of violence. You have all types of creatures that you come across. But you play as a traveler who is typically a younger person. Not always, but typically. So again, it gets across that idea of children and playing as kids. And you just kind of explore the countryside. You're going on adventures and just figuring out what's out there. It is a very lengthy book, that I love because it has so much cool stuff in here about the lore. The artwork is awesome because this is a world inhabited by dragons, which is just cool. There's a dragon that goes along with everything. You can find all different things out there, but the artwork is great and just gets across that sense of these fun adventures, very cozy and very non-violent, so sort of like slice of life, which may not necessarily be 80s, but I'm gonna say it is. What else is there? Here we go. Here's a cool one. Far Away. This one is more kind of like science fiction, where you go on these missions and you set up this really interesting map and find these creatures that do different things, and they're totally different species. And you're working to complete these different objectives and explore out there, and there's so many unexpected things that happen. But this one, I think, in a way, reminds me of E.T. at least, especially because there's just so many things that can happen, so many surprises, awesome things to come across, and it's a really fun game filled with some humor too. I've had a lot of fun playing through it, and I actually need to continue some of the missions. I haven't finished the entire campaign yet, but it's really fun, and just figuring out what's out there and finding it and setting up the map every time is just so much fun. I love it. What else? Under the Floorboards. This is another RPG that I have played solo. I actually played it like literally out, where I had some of my little animal figures or calico critters who went around the house and kind of acted this out. But this one is a cool one about sort of exploring. You're a very tiny little person, kind of like the Borrowers, just sort of going out there and exploring in in a regular house and using different items to figure out problems. Like a coin can be a shield and stuff like that. But that really gets across that sense of wonderment and adventure and just shrinking down in size and looking at the world from a different perspective. It's really, really fun. And I enjoyed it a lot when I played it. I definitely need to do it again. And you can have multiple characters that play through this. That's what I usually do with solo RPGs. Just gives a lot more stuff. I know it adds a lot of upkeep, but I enjoy it for those stories and how everyone's connected. And this one, definitely need to play that again sometime soon. What else? Here's a good one. Questlings RPG. This one I actually had the opportunity to play as a play-by-forum a little while ago, and it was great. What this is you are playing as kids who are just ordinary kids going about their business in their town. I think there's a nice map at the back here of, all the standard places that you would go around, but you have your hero form that you actually transform into. I love the illustrations. They're so colorful and different. Let's not get glare, but there's different kids, and then they have their hero forms that they transform into, and you do all other different types of stuff and just go on cool adventures in your town, and all of those places just kind of transform into a magical place depending on what type of form you're in. And it's very easy to get into. It's a quick one, a great introduction to RPGs, and there's not a lot of upkeep, there's not a lot of tracking of all these different stats, but it's just, very, very fun. You get the school, which will transform into the wizard's tower, and you have objectives you're working towards, but really it's about telling that story and going on these cool adventures as kids. Finally, that's right, my favorite, arguably. I usually don't pick favorites in these videos, I just present a list, but I'm gonna say these might be my favorites. Why? The movies that they're based on. That's right. Labyrinth, the adventure game, and The Dark Crystal, the adventure game. These are awesome. Can you get any more 80s than this? I still have yet to do the Dark Crystal one, but I have run a game of Labyrinth, And this is so cool. You go through the actual labyrinth like from the movie. There are different areas to explore and different things that can happen. And it's random, so you don't know exactly what areas you're going to go across, but you're kind of playing out the movie. And it ends ultimately with meeting Jareth. I mean, spoiler alert, but not really. This is an 80s movie. Come on. I love it. And yes, this is a little bit tricky to play solo because there are some puzzles that have answers in there, but it is a fantastic setting, at least, to set an adventure in, and I can't get enough of it. The cool thing, though, is that the Dark Crystal one is actually different in that you are not necessarily playing out the plot of the movie or the TV series that arguably was canceled way too soon. That's another story. But this one is more of an open world concept, or, I mean, I don't know if I would necessarily call it a sandbox style, but instead of having a set path, sort of in the Labyrinth one, you actually have just the whole world that you can explore and go to. You keep track of time, so there are cool things that can happen, events that you may come across, and yes, you play through it and you reach the end. I'm just trying to find... I don't know what happened to my little map, but there's a whole map, there's a whole world that you can explore and things that happen. And this one, I think, is probably better in terms of playing solo just because it's not a set pattern and there's not necessarily those puzzles that have solutions, but I love it. So there we go. A flashback to the 80s with me who, yes, once again, alive in the 80s, so I can talk about the 80s. But yes, so many cool games. And if you have any games or RPGs that remind you of the 80s, feel free to share those in the comments. I loved that time period. I love the games that get across that sense of discovery and just really cool adventures. And if there are more out there, which I'm sure there are, I would love to hear about them. So as always, thanks so much for watching and take care. Bye!